Hello, welcome back to Math Time with Professor Prime, and I am your host as always, Professor Prime. And today we're going to talk about math and Dragon Ball Superhero. Recently, I just rewatched it, like really recently, within an hour recently, and you know what? It holds up. So, but this is how it's going to go today. We're going to talk about Dragon Ball Superhero. We're going to talk about how math is used within the film, how math was used, making the film, in that meta sense. And we're going to talk about just how math is used in Dragon Ball in general, and how that pertains to the movie. And I've made like 40 videos on Dragon Ball so far. There's a lot to discuss. There always is, and I think that's pretty cool. With that in mind, before we dig in, keep in mind, there will be spoilers. Just assume all the spoilers, because I don't want to hold back. If you're fine with that, please continue. If you're not, I get it. You do what you got to do. But I don't think it's going to matter as much as you may think that it does. I mean, they spoil some things in marketing. But anyway, I get the decision either way. So I'll say, again, assume spoilers ahead, and we shall proceed. Okay, so here's the thing, right? I'm a big fan of Dragon Ball. It's been going on for quite some time. Dragon Ball is nearly 40 years. And I think it's incredibly fascinating that, we can have all these series and this, all of these different series and movies and just everything Dragon Ball, games, definitely the games, and you can still get some things that are fresh. I thought that with Dragon Ball Superhero, which I will refer to as superhero sometimes throughout this video, I think it was really good, and it was a good mix of the past and the future. So to start, there is a lot of fighting in this film, but there's also a lot of humor and a lot of other things that was not as eloquent as I wanted it to be. But let's start talking about how math is used in the movie, and we'll kind of go from there. And throughout it, I am going to talk about how I feel about the movie. Spoilers, I like it. We'll get into the why as we go on. So to start, there is math in the fighting, just across the board. There's math in the actual fights themselves. There's math in, the power levels, and we don't get explicit power levels in this movie, but they do get mentioned. And I think that it's just like an inherently interesting concept. So I'm going to go into that for a little bit, then get back to like the fighting in general. So when it comes to power levels, it's something that a lot of people in the Dragon Ball community don't want to let go of, and I get it. One, they're cool, but also it gets at why we like math in the first place, why I like math in the first place, but also why we gravitate towards it in general. Because see, here's the thing, right? Math is what the universe is doing, and when you have math as an academic concept and all the things that implies, we're trying to make sense of the universe. And so even if we're not getting the actual numbers that correspond to a power level, we're trying to figure out what's going on. And in this video, with the movie, we don't get explicit power levels, and we haven't had anything explicit for quite some time, like decades. But we still get the idea of power scaling, and we still get the implications, and I think that's pretty cool. And then with the fights themselves, I think it's fascinating because you have the characters who can raise up their power level at given moments, and adjust to the situation. You have some androids involved, and our characters can't sense them. They don't give off, ki in that, natural sense. So there's adjustments that have to be made, right? But that's far from it. Oh God, I can speak. It's been late. It is late. But that's far from the end of this tale, right? Because like here's what's happening, right? When they're battling, not only are they adjusting their power levels on a fly, they're gauging their opponents. They're paying attention to their position. They're paying attention to their opponent's position. They're also being able to, channel their ki into an energy blast. And at sorry, be able to alter the power of that. And they're also moving at these insane speeds while they do all of this. And with that speed itself, it is mathematical in its very nature, because we're dealing with speed, and that means we're dealing with time, we're dealing with distance, we're looking at how they compare, what's happening there, and characters are adjusting their speed as they go in the fight, and they got a good idea of the position and speed of their opponent. And I think that's pretty cool. And again, that's not all, right? So not only do we have all of these things, but throughout the fight, people take damage, and their energy levels are go down. So you could kind of view it as like, hey, they're at 100% and they're fighting at this power level, that power level, they're taking damage, or they're using up energy, and that could get depleted to the point where you could get to zero. And one of the things I really like is that at least for Camel 1, there's a fight that he has with Gohan later on where they do actually talk about this very thing, because Gohan is powering up, as well he should, and him and Gamma 1 are fighting, and he talks about how his energy doesn't seem to be depleting, and then he asks him about that, and he says, like, oh, well, I have a healthy amount of energy left, and I'm at 82%. I'm like, yeah, they're saying the thing, but yeah, so that's pretty cool. And then like power-ups are inherently mathematical, and we see that throughout the film. And but back to Gamma 1, we have Gamma 1 and we have Gamma 2, and just grouping them, it's just like, it seems like a simple thing, but that's math, right? Like their designs, their numbers, and then we just see numbers being used throughout the form, whether it be on a cell phone or on Henchman's uniform or a prison cell. Math is just being used all over the place, whether we're talking about the numbers themselves or we're talking about what they do, right? Because in Dragon Ball, in that world, right, they use math to do things like we do in the real world, create buildings, create technology, and all that good stuff. And so that's worth noting. But back to the fights, one of the other things that I like is, so we talked a little bit about what's going on in the fights, and in this video, in Superhero, there are a lot of fights. And what I think is really cool is that throughout those fights, they're playing around with speed, they're playing around with different angles and different rotations, and this gives you a number of effects. It kind of intensifies the battles a bit, but it also gives you an idea that, like, not only are we seeing these things, is reviewing them, from our audience viewpoint, but like we're noticing that the characters are, in it. And they're doing this, right? They're doing all these moves, and whether they realize it or not, they're doing math, right? When they're tossing their opponents around, or they're going really fast and they're keeping track of their opponent, and they're spinning around, they're doing all these things, and they punch and they might connect, they might block, they might dodge, or they might block or block. I'm sorry, it is late, but my whole thing is like, not only are they looking at the position of their opponents in general, but they're looking at different body parts of that opponent and how they might be moving those and how fast. And I think that's cool. And throughout the fights, you see, scale and scope being used in some cool ways, right? Because you have like the focus on the characters, but you have buildings around them, you have other characters around them, and so keeping track of everyone involved, having proper scale and scope is interesting. But it's not stagnant. Animation is an inherently mathematical thing. It is art in motion, and again, that's very mathematical. And also they play around with the camera work, so to speak. Because you see, You might have these characters clashing, and they might play around with like the rotations to give you this different view of the fight. But you know, they might zoom in, they might zoom out, they might play around with the editing and transitions, and it's all very cool. And throughout the, I keep on saying video, but throughout the movie, we see the Dragon Balls being talked about and used, and Dragon Balls themselves are inherently mathematical. You know, there's 7 Dragon Balls, you get them, they grant you a wish. That's how it went in the beginning. But there's been so many rules and flip-flops. At this point, in this particular movie, the dragon has been updated because, you know, that is a thing that we've seen throughout the series that is possible, right? So the dragon that we see in Superhero can grant 3 wishes. And what's also interesting is that Bulma has like a force of people just searching for the Dragon Ball, but she's also been apparently making wishes, and we'll get to that. But I think that's interesting because, you know, you have these people looking for these Dragon Balls and presumably getting paid. But with those Dragon Balls, what they're using dragon radars, and you know, they're able to track the signature of the Dragon Balls. They're able to give off their position, and they have to navigate getting to those. And we see like a little bit in some scenes, but back to the wishes. So 3 wishes. One of the wishes was Piccolo wishing to unlock his potential like Gohan and Krillin did on Namek. He tried to get that from Dende, but Dende was too young because that ability is something that Namekians are able to get when they're older, if they're of a certain clan. And you know, that's something mathematical too, right? Because he wasn't there yet. But anyway, they make that 1 wish, and that's all Piccolo wanted. So Bulma makes 2 wishes. Like one of them is, I think, for her eyelashes to be 2 millimeters long. So that's 1 wish, and so that's 2 gone. And then there's 1 more, although I think that was the last one made. But the 3rd wish that got made, I think it was the 2nd one in order in the movie, was to make her butt firmer. I'm not even kidding on that. If you've seen the movie, you know, but it feels so awkward to say, but it happened, and it was hilarious. And you know, there's math in the firmness. And math in the eyelash part 2 and the whole 3 wishes. I'm going to move on now. I'm sorry. But it happened in the movie. But yeah, so and on Earth, you have the threat of the Red Ribbon Army that has been resurrected, and you have their base and all that crazy stuff. And they have the Red Ribbon insignia on the mountain base before you even get to the hidden part, which is kind of crazy. But yeah, so to get to the plot a little bit, to talk about more math. So they get Dr. Hedo, who is Dr. Zero's grandson. And yes, I know, you know, you could also say Dr. Gero. Some people would argue that's more accurate, but I don't care. But I just wanted to say, yes, I know. But yeah, so with Dr. Zero, like, Dr. Hedo is his grandson, and he works with Magenta, who is, I think, okay, so he's Commander Red's son. I was gonna say grandson, but that's, no, he died a super long time ago within the series. So his son, Magenta, you know, ends up meeting with Dr. Hedo, and he's with his lead henchman, Carmine, who is hilarious. So they meet him and they come out with a deal, and it was interesting to see the deal go down. And, you know, there's math in deciding what gets done, because, you know, it's like, oh, well, come make, you know, robots, androids for us and such. And then it's like, no. And then it's like, well, what if we gave you like 300 million per unit or something? I think that was the number that was quoted. And throughout that conversation, that got up to like $1 billion per unit that was made. And then 6 months pass after that, and then we get everything that happens. Like, we get Gamma 1, we get Gamma 2, and eventually Cell Max, who wasn't exactly finished. But it gets really interesting because in the beginning, we get a fight between Goku and Vegeta, and you already At least to me, see that there are some like differences that stand out. So it's interesting because this is the first like mostly 3D Dragon Ball movie, and I feel like they had some fun with that. And even though in the trailers it was a little rocky, it really came together in the final product. And so yeah, I think like the one of the fights that we see earlier on, because I forget, it's like either Goku and Vegeta fought when they were on Beerus's planet, and then Gamma 1 versus Piccolo. But I think Gamma 1 versus Piccolo actually happened first. I know that I just saw this, but a lot happened. But anyway, Goku and Vegeta fight, and I think it's really cool because just from that you see so much craziness, so much back and forth, so much like, you know, spinning around, rotating, moving at these really fast speeds, countering blows, dodging blows, and all that stuff. And they also weren't allowed to transform during that fight or shoot deadly energy blasts, and so they really had to be on board. So not only do they have to gauge their own power, but their opponents, and they have to adjust accordingly. And I think it was really cool because they were just going at it, but it also was cool to see like it was a lesson for Broly, who had problems still controlling his power. But anyway, you jump back to Earth. You know, Piccolo goes on a whole journey infiltrating the Red Ribbon base. And his number was 94 on the soldier uniform. And he finds out a lot of information, and eventually, you know, we meet Janet, who we see in an earlier scene, but maybe didn't know that at the time. And she's like Pan's preschool teacher, who was 3 in this movie. We actually got an age, because like with super ages, it's kind of wonky. But yeah, so her and Piccolo know each other, and there's a lot of people on the internet that want to like ship Piccolo and Janet, and no judgment. Just is like, huh, okay, who knew? But so they know each other and everything, and there's some scenes with that, and Piccolo goes back to doing his thing, and Gohan is my favorite character, for the record, from Dragon Ball. But he was so like preoccupied in the beginning of the movie with his research, and Videl is involved in her teaching. But I like that, you know, she's teaching combat, and we get to see like more of what she does, because I feel like after her involvement with the Buu Saga, you know, outside of her being a mom, you don't really see much. But in any case though, but like her in Gohan though, like if they didn't have Piccolos, like what were they gonna do? They should be there more. But I think like one of the funniest things though was like Gohan was studying like this ant that had been discovered, that, you know, when threatened, has a golden aura, Super Saiyan. But yeah, so there's a lot of fights and a lot of cool scenes and a lot of playing around with speed and different angles and rotations, different colors and lighting, and I think that's incredibly cool. And as we go on, we go from getting just these one-on-one fights to having a massive fight against Cell Max, and we get like a kaiju battle between Cell Max and Giant Orange Piccolo. And I think what's cool about that is they kind of call back to like that form, that giant form that Piccolo takes doesn't actually increase his power, really, it just increases his size. But no matter how you cut it, it's mathematical. Just saying. But yeah, so we see that, we see a bunch of characters going. I think like what we have, all the people who are fighting Cell Max, we have Gohan, we have Piccolo, 18 Krillin, so it's 4, Goat and Trunks, 6, oh crap, I feel like there's other people, but I cannot remember at the moment, which is unfortunate, because I thought it was 8, but who am I missing? I'm sorry, again, it's been a long day, and, but yeah. So I know that they had called like the reinforcements and all that, and again, I feel like I'm missing people, but I got to name quite a few, and they all take on Cell Max, and they're all doing their own thing with that, going back and forth. Oh, you know what? Gamma 1 and Gamma 2 are in that fight, so there we go, 8. Haha. But yeah, so they're all taking on Cell Max. You got these 8 warriors. At first, just 7 because Krillin had to get involved a little later. Which, for the record, when Krillin did get involved, because he was like protecting Bulma and Pan, they tried to play it off like, oh yeah, I don't want to join the fight, but Krillin has it rough. But he comes in with the Destructo Disc. He comes in with the Solar Flare, and he does his thing. And we get like an appropriately aged Goten and Trunks, and they fuse. And speaking of the fusion, that's an inherently mathematical thing. You have these 2 characters, but their powers aren't just added, they're multiplied. We don't know the multiplier, but they're multiplied on a grand scale. But the idea is like, you have to have the right positions when you're doing the fusion dance, and you have to have the right angles. Otherwise, one wrong move, and you're not going to get this like crazy powerful beam. You're going to get something like something weaker, whether it be someone who's on a bigger side of things or something like someone who's like skinnier and frail looking. Either way, you get an imperfect fusion. And so that's a big thing. And so throughout the film, though, we get Piccolo turning into Orange Piccolo. We get Gohan turning into Beast, and we don't know the multipliers for those, but we know that they are drastically more powerful. And everything that we see in the movie with Gohan Beast, a little bit that we do see, coupled with some statements that were made about him, it leads us to believe like he is crazy powerful. And it's not a shock to me because Gohan is always catching up, and I'm glad that he got to have his new power. Because see, here's the thing, not only do I think it's cool because, again, I'm a Gohan fan, but it's a payoff. Because see, in episode 90, my favorite episode of Dragon Ball Super, sure, but Dragon Ball period, you have episode 90, which came out in 2017, which is 5 years before Superhero came out. And I think what's interesting about that is, so Dragon Ball Super ended at, I think, 131 episodes, I want to say. I could double check that, but I think like that's what the case. But I bring that up because Gohan Beast is a payoff after 5 years, 41 episodes, and a whole movie before it. It's a payoff after all of that to what Gohan said in episode 90, which was he wants to unlock a new transformation that's different from what Goku and Vegeta were doing. And he finally did it. So there's no reason not to believe that he was working on something, and that was like the final breakthrough he had to push through. But it was interesting. I didn't care for the designs for Orange Piccolo and Gohan Beast at first, but they grow on, yeah. But yeah, so I'm trying to think if there's anything else major I wanted to say. Well, just a few things. Well, one, you have voice acting, and with voice acting, it's also mathematical because not only are you having to adjust your volume for different scenes, but you have to deal with breathing and matching things up with dubbing, and also the time that it takes to voice act, and the money, and the energy. It's so many other things that go on with that process. And not only that, there is like math in the writing, because it's Superhero is a movie that is about 100 minutes, and so there's so much that goes into like deciding how long a scene is going to be, what purpose is it going to serve, what is it going to get across to the audience, and also you have your budget to consider. And if the movie is considered profitable or not is depending on the box office. So you have to consider that. And it's like, well, is your movie marketable? Has it been marketed? How expensive is it to go see the movie? And it's gonna vary place to place, but also people's time. So there's so much that goes into those processes, but it's worth considering, right? And just like having everything come together on a technical level. Yeah, and so there's so many other things though that you can discuss, and I encourage you to do so. And in the remainder of time for this, I am going to talk about my views on the video. Keep on saying it, the movie overall. So I liked Superhero. I thought it was funny, and there's also math in that because, you know, setup plus punchline equals joke. And there's so many formulas that you can play around with in that formula. So many things, and timing matters. And you can go on and on, but I like that it was funny. I like that it was action packed. I like that the fights were done really well. They were playing around with so many different techniques, and I like that it was just. My throat is getting dry. Distinctive from Broly. Broly, Dragon Ball Superhero Broly was a great movie. Dragon Ball Superhero is a great movie. Both focus on different sets of characters while having the other ones in it. Although Broly barely had other ones in it, and it didn't have Gohan in it, and that's crazy. But the whole thing is like, these are both great movies, and I think that Superhero sets itself apart. They're taking a more measured approach in the slice of life parts, and then just focus on the characters we don't get to see. I'm sorry. And I think that was cool. And also, Gohan is my favorite character. Piccolo doesn't get enough spotlight, so it was great seeing them. It was cool seeing Pan, because, you know, you see her as like a baby in Super, so that was cool. And I really dug it. I felt like it was very balanced. It has Baphomet too. So I'm going to cut the video off. I'm going to also get some water. And I will see you all in the future.